Hello, and welcome to this episode of Inside Legal ESG podcast. We are incredibly honored to have with us today Angela Monaghan of Bates Wells. She is their Purpose and Impact Manager, and she is going to share with us today how Bates Wells is addressing ESG, how they became a B Corp, certified B Corp, and then how they're serving their clients around ESG. So welcome, Angela, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me. It's good to be here.
So I'm going to start with the obvious question. Tell me how Bates Wells made the decision to become B Corp certified and when that happened.
It was a really obvious decision for the firm. I wasn't here when the decision was made, but it happened around about 2015, which is when some of our partners were actually involved in bringing the B Corp movement to the UK. So they were involved in bringing the movement here, involved in writing the legal test, and kind of looked at it and said, this is a no-brainer. It's obvious that we should be involved in this because the firm at heart has always been very much focused on purpose, impact, serving those clients that are in it to do good.
And I noticed one of the headlines on your website says using law as a force for good, helping our clients to make positive impact on their people and society. Has that always been one of your guiding principles or mission statement, or when did that come to fruition?
Yeah, that basically started in, I think, 1970 or
Oh
1971.
my, yeah.
And when we were formed, and has been the main mission ever since. We were originally set up specifically to serve the charity sector in the UK. Our lawyers have been involved in instigating all sorts of changes in the way that charities can operate in the UK, in the way that businesses can be structured for wider good. So community interest companies, which is a type of company structure that we have over here that puts benefit back into the community. That was a structure that some of our lawyers came up with. They were involved in making LGBT and environmental issues charitable objects in the UK in line with the Charity Commission requirements. So it's something that sort of runs right through the DNA of the firm. And it has sort of moved from specifically a charity and social enterprise focus to one that looks much more at those commercial clients and their capabilities to do good, to make a difference, and their will to do so.
And it's so interesting you should say that, because I think certainly this whole increasing focus on ESG is dispelling the idea that only nonprofits or charitable organizations or social impact only applies to your volunteer services or your philanthropy at year end, rather than the way we conduct our business day in and day out. And I think that is a very good evolution to see. So, because this seems to be part of your ethos and part of your DNA from the beginning, did anything change for you once you became B Corp certified?
Yeah, actually, I think it had a real it had a great way of bringing focus to the firm, but also to the partnership, right? We're a legal firm, so there are about 40 odd people who run this place, and they all have an equal stake in it. And there are a community of peers who are responsible for the rest of the organization. And so becoming a B Corp meant that we had a really good way of articulating our mission and not having a worry that there was a mission drift potentially up the road as the partnership changed, as different people joined the partnership, and as different people joined the organization. So it's become a real focus and a real helpful focus in terms of recruitment. It's been really positive in terms of helping us to articulate what we want to achieve and helping us to improve, like continuously seek ways to do better.
I was going to ask you about the talent piece, and you already answered that it seems to be a real attraction when looking for new talent, as well as keeping your existing talent, right? It's a source of pride. Um, I think Bates Wells was the first law firm in the UK to be B Corp certified. Are there others now? Do you know?
There are. It's great, actually. We were on our own for a very long time, about 5 years. And then Radiant came along, and then suddenly in the last, I think, 3 or 4 months, there's like, a kind of getting up to 10, I think,
Wow.
and more certifying every day. So it's really good to see that there are more firms coming through wanting to do this. I mean, in the last 2 years, I personally have spoken to probably about 20 professional service firms contacting us saying, how do you do it? How do we do it? So there's definitely a lot of appetite in the accountancy field, in the legal sector.
And is that one of your service lines to help other people become B Corp certified, or are you doing this out of the goodness of your heart?
Bit of both.
Uh-huh.
Generally, if someone wants to know something about being a B Corp, I'm a bit of an evangelist, so they just, wheel me out and I happily talk their ear off. But it's also a service line for us. We've increasingly, we get a lot of joy working for B Corps and for purposeful businesses. We get to flex and try out new things when we work for them. And so we've now developed a whole suite of services that we can offer to purposeful businesses and B Corps, but not just them. So we're looking at now, we've just put together a guide about just sort of, and I was surprised at just how much of our practice actually feeds into this. And I've been working on this for 2 years, but everything from real estate to immigration to employment contracts and governance and commercial contracts, everything that we do, we've been able to kind of look at through a B Corp lens and go, right, how can we do this better? How can we make this more meaningful, have more impact, drive more change, not just for us as in terms of how we operate, but also to encourage our clients, because that's where we have an impact. If we put one clause in a contract that commits the organization and whoever it partners with to a 1.5 degree climate heating target, that's 40 organizations that will then be working towards a Paris aligned goal.
And presumably you have clients that aren't B Corp, but if I leverage what you just said, it's like this permeates all of the services you provide your clients, because you're thinking about serving your clients with this lens, with this mindset.
We are. And I mean, I can be quite evangelical about it. Our lawyers are much better at being pragmatic. And so it means that we give our clients a really good service, even if what they want is a bog standard employment agreement. It means that if they want to explore different ways that they can articulate that, we're in a good position to help them. If they don't, we're also in a, they're all, properly, fully qualified, very experienced lawyers. And so, but it means that we have a creative way of kind of communicating with our clients and interacting with them. So, for instance, our disputes team have been doing a lot of work encouraging clients to mitigate, not litigate. So, look at where the challenges are, look at where the risks are, try and solve those before it becomes something that goes to court, before it becomes a hugely expensive, onerous proposition for you. So that's sort of how it permeates the culture here.
And then one of the other things we've talked about earlier is, how do you collaborate with clients on ESG topics? Share a little of that with me.
We're really open. I mean, anyone that goes to our website will see we're always putting out resources, sharing tips and information to encourage clients and anyone else that comes across us to take those meaningful steps. We run a number of events as well where we share our knowledge and expertise, but also learn from our clients. So those are the kind of main ways, but also we'll often, at the moment, I'm kind of grappling with a couple of big ideas, and the sort of thing is to kind of go out, do a round table, talk to people, think about how it works right now, what would it take to be better, and then sort of taking that and running with it around, what does ESG look like for the charity sector? That's something that we've been working on for a year or so. So we talked at the outset about, there being an assumption that those third sector groups do ESG, do good through the services they provide to the end user or the environment or whatever. But I've worked in the charity sector, so I know also what it's like to be within that organization and to be felt to, and so there is more that can be done operationally in any sort of organization. So last November, we ran our annual charity conference, and one of the key areas of focus on that was what are the challenges for charities in embedding ESG? Where are the opportunities? And how could it work for them? And from that, we've been talking to some of our bigger charity clients and thinking about what the next steps for that might be. Because as you know, ESG is a minefield, and there is no B Corp certification for charities. It's a great kind of catch-all for businesses to help them start to embed ESG. And so we're trying to look at how we might help to systematize and quantify what it looks like. That's just something that we find really interesting and exciting. And so that's not a service line, that's just something that we do with our clients for the, that using law as a force for good idea.
When it comes to helping your clients on the E of ESG, are you finding that you need a different set of skills with respect to the people you hire, or are you collaborating with carbon accounting companies, or how are you helping them on like the carbon metrics?
We're not specifically offering that as a service. I think particularly in the UK market, there are a number of really creative options for people and organizations of different sizes, starting from sort of tech options to bespoke consultancy services. If our clients want us to put them in touch with people, we absolutely always will. But what we are doing is looking at the kind of supply chain and helping our clients with looking at ways that they can embed metrics, measures, standards within their supply agreements to help them to meet their aspirations on the E of ESG. So if, for instance, that case study I mentioned earlier, that came from a Chancery Lane project template clause, encouraging businesses to collaborate on meeting a 1.5 degree target, heating target. And there are others that we've been building around kind of putting in audit rights, looking at how people can facilitate the metrics, the communication, the standards that they want to embed within their scope 3 sort of supply emissions.
That's so interesting you should raise that, because that's one of the challenges I see in the law firms that I work with. Is they don't quite understand that they're part of their client's scope 3. So they operationally really need to get their arms around what their carbon emissions are. And that law firms are businesses too. And so they have supply chains, not from a raw materials perspective, but from a vendor partner and purchasing and supplies, et cetera. Not to mention air travel, that we as a law firm also have greenhouse gas emissions and suppliers that we have to collaborate with. I would love to, we've talked a lot about client services. Let's talk a little bit about that perspective, the operational perspective of Bates Wells, and how do you align those two? How do you make sure Bates Wells is doing what it is you're helping your clients do?
I've very thankfully, our operational team have been measuring and reducing our carbon footprint since 2009.
Oh
so
my.
operationally, this is something that's embedded and ingrained in the organization far more probably than it is in the practice in terms of carbon footprint, environmental impact. So we have, as I said, since 2009 been measuring increasingly since 2019, increasing what we measure, sort of getting down into the bones of what our scope 3s are, looking at what we can add, how we can start moving towards science-based targets. We've been balancing the residual emissions because obviously we all have residual emissions, but we're really careful about the projects we sort of partner with on that, and we always overbalance because we can't measure like at the moment we're not set up to measure everything. And then we also, like, we've taken all sorts of other kind of steps that we talk about all the time with other businesses, with other clients, to sort of encourage them, because they're actually money saving at the end of the day. Like, we don't have water coolers anymore. We don't have to worry about the emissions of like heavy bottles of water being delivered to our office. We don't have to worry about water sitting in plastic water butts in the office, because we introduced a filtration system, and everyone can get nice clean water from the mains, carbonated or still, without any of that. So our operations team are really creative, really engaged, really enmeshed into this idea. So we have zero waste to landfill. We are 80% plastic free on our catering, single-use plastic free on our catering, stationery, and other operational suppliers. Our cleaners use like dissolvable drops rather than buying in new plastic bottles every time that they need them. So there's a lot going on. Operationally, we've been default vegetarian in our catering for several years. All this stuff is stuff that sort of actually, I think a lot of times our people don't see that this isn't normal.
Right.
This is normal for Bates Wells.
Yes, but I'm here to tell you, and you know, it is not normal for most law firms, not even close. I'm just amazed that you've been default vegetarian with your catering for a number of years, because I think it is a challenge for most law firms to introduce, all of our options today are going to be vegetarian. Frankly, they wouldn't even notice if we were to just offer vegetarian options. It's like they wouldn't even notice. But I think because it's been such high on people's radar screens now, they would start to notice and get some pushback. Tell me about the big nut to crack for most professional services firms, and that's air travel. How do you discuss that? How do you address that? How do you compensate? How do you reduce?
Very luckily, most of our client base is local to us. So air travel isn't a massive issue for us. We've got a really relatively low carbon footprint, despite measuring working from home emissions, commuting to the office emissions, and everything else in between, because the number of flights we take are really, really small. We always encourage people to use Zoom or Teams if they need to talk to people further afield. Where they have to travel, obviously we offset that, but we try to avoid it as much as possible. We have introduced this thing called climate perks. Very annoyingly, we introduced it in January 2020. And so take up has been relatively small, where people can claim up to 2 journey days for traveling sustainably for their holidays. So if you are taking the train to Amsterdam and it would take 4 hours, but if you're flying there, it would take you 1, you can claim those extra 3 hours back. And also we sort of partner with B Corps as much as possible, and other sustainable businesses on things like travel. So we partner with this, I think they're Danish B Corp called Goodwings, for hotel bookings, and they're already like net zero.
This is just amazing to have this conversation with you, because you are so far ahead of what most law firms are doing. This is a great example for others to learn about. Tell me your predictions or your observations on what this increasing focus on ESG does mean and can mean for the legal profession.
I think there are definitely challenges. We go as far as we can go right now, but there are obviously challenges around where our advice goes and what the emissions are from that, that's a really big nut that we're trying to crack right now. What does it mean if we give someone legal advice that then results in some sort of harm to the environment, for instance, or construction of housing that may lead to some sort of biodiversity loss? That's a thing that's sort of a really big issue that's looming, I think, for law firms and other advisory firms. But we're thinking about it and trying to work it out and working with others to do that. So some of our lawyers are working with a group of other people in different firms to sort of, their brains are much bigger than mine.
Yes,
because I can't even begin to get to the bottom of how to get to that.
yes.
But I think all the research shows that you are more resilient as a business if you really truly embed ESG into the way you operate. You are more likely to grow as a business if you do the same. And the youth, sounding like an old fart that I am, the youth of today are much more likely to vote with their feet, either as talent or as clients when they look for services. So I think it's something that we've all got to get on board with, but it's also something that if it doesn't kind of start to permeate your culture, will be seen for what it is. And so there's a real challenge there for the sector, but a really great opportunity, right? A fantastic opportunity to be able to have a really positive influence, to have make a real change. You know, I think oftentimes the way that political systems work can be slow and cumbersome. We can make change happen through very simple, slight technical changes in the way that we word a contract.
I completely agree. And part of the reason my practice focuses on law firms is because I just feel like their sphere of influence is so large and so immediate that regardless of how long it takes regulators to make change or legislation to happen, they can do things right now that are going to have a tremendous impact. And back to your earlier point about what is the societal impact of the work we're doing for clients, and how do we manage that? I've heard the phrase, you've heard the phrase financed emissions. I've heard the phrase lawyered emissions, and that lawyers have to understand that the work they're doing for clients has not only a carbon impact, but a societal impact. And I hope to see the day sometime soon when law firms will not just talk about their pro bono program or their philanthropy or their day of service when they talk about social impact, but they actually talk about the work we do for clients, because that by far and away is the greatest societal impact. Hands down, no questions asked, the greatest societal impact of a law firm is through its client work.
I absolutely agree. I think, and sometimes we feel a little bit challenged because we put a lot of work and effort and time into the side of things that you're describing. What we can do for our clients, how we can help. I mean, we've got lawyers here who are really pushing the envelope on EDI and governance structures and challenging and setting up organizations that are so much more inclusive. That sort of sits outside of the realm of that framework that everyone else is existing in right now. And that's the bit that has impact, that has a real, makes a massive difference. So not only operationally are we kind of focusing on everything that we can do, not just from the E, but also the S and the G. But for our clients, we're sort of showing what we're demonstrating by doing, and then demonstrating by creative thinking and making those tweaks. And so, yeah, I think it's so much more important for us to get that right. Because anyone, I don't know, we can all go for our volunteering days and we can all do our pro bono, but if every client has the opportunity, and let's face it, law firms have hundreds and hundreds of clients, if every client has the opportunity to make an employment contract that is more inclusive and supports vulnerable people into work or whatever, that's
Mhm.
going to be far greater, of far greater import.
Yep, I absolutely agree. And it's clear that we both share that vision and are working in that space to help bring that vision to the forefront. So leave me with some predictions of if I were to come back and talk to you a year from now, 2 years from now, what do you hope will have happened or changed or improved by then?
I would love to see this sort of approach to operating the norm within the sector. I'd love to see that. Um, I would like to see lawyers not burning out,
Mm,
and feeling like they can be their whole person at work. I'd love to see, things like the Better Business Act in place or more,
mhm,
you know.
mhm.
Um, from a Bates Wells perspective, I think you will see us going further and deeper and harder. There's like a real drive and a commitment to doing this. And I think, so I've just read this great book called Citizens by John Alexander. And he talks about the importance of shifting from a consumer society to a citizen society. I'd like to see us all seeing ourselves as citizens, and feeling not just rights, but also responsibilities towards each other and our planet.
Well, now I have another book on my to-do list of reading. So thank you very much. And again, thank you so much for your insights today. I'm sure our audience has learned a lot. I think Bates Wells is a great example of how law firms could be operating, and perhaps I would say should be operating, so that we all have the opportunity to be on a livable planet and sustain society going forward. Um, Thank you again, Angela. I will have you back a year from now and we'll see how many of our predictions come true. Thanks again.
Let's hope all of them.
Yes, I agree. Okay, thank you. Take care.
Thanks, Pam.